Today we are going to do experiment number 1, solubility. Chemicals and materials used in this experiment are DI water, methanol, hexane, butanol, octanol, methylene chloride, ethanol, 1 molar HCl, 6 molar HCl, 6 molar NaOH, 1 molar NaOH, benzophenone, biphenyl, malonic acid, ethyl 4-aminobenzoate, benzoic acid, test tubes, plastic pipettes, labels, spatula. So regarding the disposal of the chemical waste, dispose of the dichloromethane solutions into the bottle labeled halogenated waste, because dichloromethane contains chlorine in it, so that's the halogen, right? So we're gonna dispose of in the halogenated waste. And the solutions which contain water will go to the aqueous waste, and all other organic liquids and the solutions will go basically to the non-halogenated waste. So this experiment is divided actually into 4 parts, A, B, C, and D. So in part A and B, we're going to investigate the solubility of different substances in different solvents. And in part C, which is kind of similar to A and B, we will look for the miscibility and immiscibility of the solvents, or you can say that you're going to find the miscible and immiscible pairs of liquids. And in part D, we're going to investigate the solubility of organic acids and bases. The solubility of a solute in a solvent is the most important chemical principle underlying 3 basic techniques that you are going to learn in this semester, and those are crystallization, extraction, and chromatography. Well, if you understand the structural feature of a substance that determines its solubility in various solvents, will help you in predicting the solubility behavior and understanding the techniques that are based on that property. Understanding solubility behavior will also help you understand what's going on during a chemical reaction, well, especially when there is more than one liquid phase present or when a precipitate is formed. So let's start with part A, solubility of solid compounds. Here I have 3 labeled test tubes with water, hexane, and methanol. I'm going to weigh benzophenone now, about 0.040 gram in all of the 3 test tubes, and then I'm going to add water, hexane, and methanol in these 3 test tubes separately. So this is about 40 milligrams of benzophenone. This is benzophenone in the test tube labeled with water. Similarly, you can weigh 40 milligrams of benzophenone into the other 2 test tubes labeled with hexane and methanol. And I have already tiered the beaker and the test tube before adding the benzophenone to the test tube. This is about 40 milligrams of benzophenone in the test tube labeled hexane. This is about 40 milligrams of benzophenone in the test tube labeled methanol. This is the 4th test tube control. So I'm going to add actually about 40 milligrams of benzophenone into this test tube as well. This is about 40 milligrams of benzophenone in the test tube control. Now I'm going to add 1 milliliter of DI water into this test tube, which is labeled with water. Now I'm going to turn on the stopwatch and I'm going to stir it continuously until 60 seconds are over. This is the observation after 60 seconds. So this is basically the test tube water, the test tube labeled with water, and this is control. In this measuring cylinder, now I have 1 milliliter of methanol, which I will be adding into this test tube labeled with methanol. Well, before having the methanol, the measured amount, I actually rinse this measuring cylinder with a couple of drops of methanol, and I dump those drops into the non-halogenated waste. The reason is, since DI water was there, right? So I need to remove the traces of that. So DI water is soluble in methanol, or you can say methanol is soluble in DI water. So it will change the polarity of the methanol. So we have to remove the traces of the DI water. And later, after the experiment, I'm going to pool this non-halogenated waste in the beaker to the main container which is kept in the lab. So I'm now going to add the methanol into the test tube. Here is the timer, 60 seconds, stirring. So this is the comparison of the control and methanol. Now I have 1 milliliter of hexane into the measuring cylinder. I did the same thing what I did with methanol. So before adding hexane, I removed the traces of methanol by rinsing the measuring cylinder with hexane, and I dumped all that hexane into this non-halogenated waste beaker. So now I'm going to add the hexane. Turn on the stopwatch, stirring. So this is the comparison of the hexane and control. So now I'm going to dispose of these 3 different solutions into the respective waste containers, and then I will wash these test tubes, dry them with the help of the paper towel, and have them ready to test the solubility of biphenyl in these 3 different solvents. This is about 40 milligrams of biphenyl into the test tube labeled with water. This is about 40 milligrams of biphenyl into the test tube labeled methanol. This is about 40 milligrams of the biphenyl into the test tube labeled hexane. About 40 milligrams in the test tube labeled with control in case of biphenyl. So this is 1 milliliter of water, DI water. I'm going to add into this test tube labeled with water. This is comparison with control. Now I'm going to add 1 milliliter of methanol into the test tube labeled methanol. Comparison with control. Now I'm going to add hexane. Comparison with control. About 40 milligrams of malonic acid into the test tube labeled water. About 40 milligrams of the malonic acid into the test tube labeled methanol. About 40 milligrams of malonic acid into the test tube labeled hexane. About 40 milligrams of malonic acid in control test tube. Now I'm going to add 1 milliliter of DI water into this test tube labeled with water. Comparison with control. I'm going to add now methanol. Comparison with control. This is hexane, so I'm going to add the hexane into this tube. Comparison with control. So now we are going to start the part B of this experiment, solubility of different alcohols in two different solvents, water and hexane. So I have 1 milliliter of water in this test tube and 1 milliliter of hexane in this test tube. I'm gonna add first of all octanol into these two different solvents, and you can note down the observations whether this is octanol is soluble in water and hexane or not. So I'm gonna add 20 drops, and you are going to record the observation after each drop. Similarly, I'm going to repeat this test with butanol and methanol. So I'll be having two fresh separate test tubes for water and hexane for these two alcohols. So I'm going to add octanol dropwise into water. So this is the final observation after adding 20 drops. Now I'm going to repeat the same process, same steps with hexane. This is after adding 20 drops. So now you would see the solubility of 1 butanol with water and hexane. So first we will see with water. This is the observation after adding all the 20 drops. Now we are going to test with hexane. So this is the final observation after adding 20 drops. Now we are going to test the solubility of methanol in water and hexane. So let's start with water first. So this is the final observation after adding 20 drops. Okay, so now let's test the solubility of methanol in hexane. Part C of this experiment is miscible and immiscible liquids. So we are going to determine whether the two liquids, they are miscible or immiscible in each other. So these are the labeled test tubes. water and ethanol, water and diethyl ether, water and methylene chloride, water and hexane, and water and hexane and methylene chloride. I didn't mention initially when I was mentioning the list of chemicals and materials used. So there is one more organic liquid you are going to use in part C, which is diethyl ether. And this is ethanol in this measuring cylinder, because my first test tube is water plus ethanol. So if you see these liquids, they are all the first liquids in the label, like water, 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 and hexane. So in the first test tube, I'm going to add ethanol, and I'm going to basically shake the test tubes for 10 to 20 seconds, about 15 seconds I'm going to do, and then you can record the observations. Rest of the test tubes, I'm going to do the same thing. So basically I'm going to add the second liquid in rest of the test tubes and shake them about 15 seconds, and you can see the observations later. So I'm going to mix this 1 milliliter of ethanol into water. So you can note down the observations now. In this test tube, I added 1 milliliter of diethyl ether into water, and this is the observation after shaking for about 15 seconds. This is 1 milliliter of water and 1 milliliter of methylene chloride. And I shook it basically for about 15 seconds. This is water and hexane. This is hexane and methylene chloride. Part D is solubility of organic acids and bases. Organic acid that we are going to use is benzoic acid, and base is ethyl 4-aminobenzoate. And so these are the three different solvents. Because of that, I labeled the test tubes: water, 1 molar NaOH, and 1 molar HCl. So I'm going to weigh about 30 milligrams of benzoic acid, and I will add to these three test tubes separately. And then I'm going to add water, DI water, 1 molar NaOH and 1 molar HCl, and test the solubility of the benzoic acid in all these three solvents. About 30 milligrams of benzoic acid in the test tube labeled water. About 30 milligrams of benzoic acid in 1.0 molar HCl labeled test tube. So now this is the observation of benzoic acid with 1 milliliter of water. I stir the solution with a spatula for about 20 seconds. You can see it now. This is with 1 molar NaOH. This is with 1 molar HCl. Now I'm going to take the test tube of 1 molar NaOH right? And I'm gonna add basically the 6 molar HCl into it until the solution turns acidic. So I'm going to use one more thing, which is pH paper. You can see this is the bottom of the pH paper. You can add this thing to the materials and chemicals use list. So I'm going to test the pH of the solution, whether it is acidic or not. So you can clearly see the solution is now acidic, right? I'll show you here. See, this is the pH range. This is the pH range. So it is basically, between 1 to 2. So this solution is pretty acidic. Tested the pH of the solution. Now I'm going to shake it for about 15 seconds. This is after shaking. About 30 milligrams of the ethyl 4-aminobenzoate in the test tube labeled water. About 30 milligrams of ethyl 4-aminobenzoate in 1 molar NaOH test tube. About 30 milligrams of ethyl 4-aminobenzoate in the test tube labeled 1 molar HCl. So this is the solubility of the ethyl 4-aminobenzoate in water. So I stirred it for about 20 seconds. This is in 1 molar NaOH. This is in 1 molar HCl. Now I will take the 1 molar HCl solution test tube, and to it I'm going to add 6 molar NaOH dropwise. Now I'm going to check the pH of this solution. So you can see this solution is highly basic. The pH is about between 12 to 13. Now I'm going to shake this test tube for about 20 seconds, and then you can record the observations whether this precipitate is dissolved after that or not. Observation after the 20 seconds shaking. That's all in this experiment number 1. You are going to turn in the data pages and the report for grading. Thank you.